Hey guys, so Soul Eater has been out in the West for quite a bit now, and as a result, we have all gotten a little bit more time and experience to play the class. Now, I originally made my first kind of like Soul Eater tips and tricks video, and if you haven't seen that, it's on the top left of the screen. I originally made that video around the beginning of when Soul Eater first came out in the West. I think like maybe like a week out. And I mainly use that as an opportunity to tell people like, hey, here are some initial tips and tricks that I think if you're not doing, this would help you out with your DPS and learn how to play the class. But since then, I have learned quite a bit more about the class and had more additional tips to give you guys for the class that, are maybe just a little bit more advanced and less on just like, hey, let's do the bare minimum and actually do the damage. But here are some like kind of more advanced techniques to help you squeeze a little bit more extra out of the class. So I'm going to start kind of like general at first in this video, like, smaller tips, but then work my way into the more intricate details of the class. So let's get started. The first thing I wanted to mention has to do with Soul Snatch mode. So as we all know, when we fill up our edge meter to max, we go into Soul Snatch mode. And unfortunately, we can't really control when we go into it other than, when the meter gets maxed, then we go into it. But as we all know, we do less damage in that mode. So we want to avoid being in that mode as much as we can. So something that I wanted to point out, and I don't think people think about this enough, is that in those areas in raids before the boss, those areas with a bunch of trash mobs, right? You need to make sure that as a Knight's Edge Soul Eater, you go into there and get your meter up to max and go into Soul Snatch mode before you head into the boss. Now, the reason for this is because a lot of times I'll see Soul Eaters, they'll do their normal rotations and things like that in that area, and then they walk out of the fight having half their, edge meter filled up. And then when they actually go into the raid itself, then their rotation becomes awkward. They head into Soul Snatch mode kind of early, and as a result, you are losing out on DPS because of that. That's why you want to be able to go into that mode before you go into the boss. That way, when you start the raid itself, you are starting off with a 0 edge meter, and you can just start your rotation and do everything as you would normally. That is something that I think is kind of a small detail, but does affect your DPS quite a bit. So again, I'd recommend everybody to do that, even if it means you have to near the end of the gate, just spam some pink moves to get it out, right? Just tell your group, hey, I gotta go to the bathroom for a second. So that when you're, after you spam your pink moves and get into Soul Snatch, you can just use that time to let your moves go off cooldown. But yeah, so you gotta make sure that you get into Soul Snatch mode before you go into the gate, or just have a very little meter so that it goes and drains down by the time that you start the raid. Now, the second piece of advice I have for you guys has to do with Conviction Judgment. You want to proc your Conviction Judgment on your rotation as much as you can. Of course, there is RNG to it, right? So sometimes it doesn't happen, but as much as you can, you don't want to mess up this rotation. You always want to use your Soul Drain first into Lunatic's Edge, which is your Conviction first, and then your Judgment. I'll show you what happens when you don't proc that and just, forget about your Conviction Judgment, right? You're going to go into your normal rotation, and then you're going to head into this part where you're using your second Vestige, and you're like, okay, my rotation's reset, right? I'm going to start again to try to get into my last 2 pink skills and then go into Soul Snatch mode. But what ends up happening is you have like this weird, awkward, like 4 to 5 second period where you can't use the last piece of your rotation. So that messes everything up. You're standing there, not doing damage, or maybe you're spamming your purple skills and doing a little bit of damage, but you're not doing your rotation smoothly because of that. If you're able to proc your Conviction Judgment at the beginning of the fight, right? So let's just do this. Conviction Judgment. And then you go into your normal rotation, right? And for me, I'd say that Vestige and Lethal Spinning are interchangeable for when you do, which one you do first in that second part. So now you go into your rotation. You do still have this little bit of downtime, but much less compared to before. And in an actual raid setting, when you are, using your moves and having to dodge attacks and things like that, it's going to feel even smoother because in Trixie and you don't have to dodge anything, so your cooldowns aren't really going to match up exactly. But in an actual raid situation, they're going to match up quite nicely if you use your Conviction Judgment correctly on that first one. And this leads me to talk about Vestige. So this isn't really like a DPS type of thing. It's more of like a quality of life, I guess, or timing to make sure that you're throwing out your moves smoothly. But you actually can use Vestige, like hold down the button before your previous move ends, and then you'll start using your Vestige and charging it up the moment that it comes out. So let's say I throw out Reaper Scythe, right? I'm gonna start holding it down right now, and then it comes out the moment it's finished. Same with lethal spinning, right? You can hold down lethal spin or press lethal spinning, hold it down before it starts, then it'll come out. Of course, the one thing to note is you can't hold it down for too long before the previous skill ends. Let's say I start holding the skill down at the beginning of Reaper Scythe, right? So throw it out, immediately hold it down. Vestige does not come out. You do need to wait for the skill to almost be over, then hold it down, and then it will come out. And again, same for lethal spinning. Wait a little bit, then you hold it down, and it'll come out. The next thing that is very, very important for DPSing in any class, actually, not just Soul Eater, is knowing your skill priorities and knowing which skills do the most damage. Now, normally I would go on to, or tell people to go onto the community guide to take a look at that, right? But unfortunately, the community guide does not have this information. It says it's, to be determined, to be announced, something like that. And because of that, I actually don't have like a clear thing for you guys to see. So I actually had to test it myself. But what I can let you know is from my test, Guillotine Swing, of course, is going to be your most powerful skill, right? This skill is going to be your strongest skill and contributing to the majority of your damage. And now, this is a common misconception. A lot of people think that your Reaper Scythe is one of your, probably the second most or the third most damaging skill in your rotation. But no, that is actually on Vestige. And that's because, one, you have two charges of this skill, right? So you're going to be using it twice, but it is the other pink skill that you use as an empowered pink skill. In your rotation, you actually never use your Reaper Scythe as an empowered skill. So as a result, in terms of damage skills, it is actually your lowest damaging main damage skill, your main DPS skill. How the order goes is Guillotine Swing is number 1, Vestige is number 2, then it's Lethal Spinning, and then it's Reaper Scythe in terms of the order of damage. So when you're prioritizing which moves you should definitely hit and land every hit on the boss, you should think about those moves in that order. Definitely make sure you land your Guillotine Swing. Try to, make sure you land your Vestiges. Try to land your entirety of your Lethal Spinning, and then it comes Reaper Scythe. I'd say Reaper Scythe is actually more of a utility skill more than anything. Of course, you want to use it in, after your Guillotine Swings for the Soul Snatch meter, right? Or the Edge meter. But what Reaper Scythe does do is it gives you knock-up immunity. This is something that none of your other skills have. And because of this, it makes Reaper Scythe actually quite an important move. You should be using the knock-up immunity that Reaper Scythe gives for you to be able to land your Guillotine Swings well. Because when you press Guillotine Swing, it's a very fast animation, right? So you can actually just, if you see a boss doing an attack and they stand still, that's a perfect opportunity for you to use Guillotine Swing because, one, Guillotine Swing comes out, it activates fast as a skill, but takes forever to come down, right? So when a boss is able to stand still during an attack animation, you can actually just jump into it, press Guillotine Swing, and then hold down Reaper Scythe for that immunity to be able to greed that hit so you don't get knocked up, right? That's something that I would say is probably the most important thing for you to do with your Reaper Scythe, is using it as a knock-up immunity to use it to greed damage for your Guillotine Swing and making sure that it actually lands. And here is the last and final tip that I have for you guys, and this is actually where the complicated piece comes in. And that has to do with this skill, Harvest. As we were talking about super armors, right, for Reaper Scythe, as I said, Reaper Scythe has a knock-up immunity, so you don't get knocked up. It's level 2 super armor. But pretty much every single one of your skills has paralysis immunity, stagger immunity, except for Harvest. And this is very important because Harvest is one of your biggest meter gen skills. You use it in every single one of your rotations, so you want to be able to land that. But at the same time, it is the hardest to land meter gen because it is the only one without stagger immunity, paralysis immunity. So you can just get knocked out of it just like that with any little swipe or sneeze from the boss. So you should really, one, just prioritize being able to hit the skill and being able to land it. So make sure you're using it safely and not when a boss is attacking you or about to wind up an attack, right? Even if it's just a small little stagger, you're gonna get knocked out of it. But at the same time, you can't just sit around and wait for like an open window to attack with this attack every time, right? You want to be able to keep your DPS uptime. So one thing to note, and this is very important, is that Harvest does not need to land every hit to make your rotation smooth. And what I mean by that is when you're doing your blocks of meter gen, right? Normally it's Soul Drain into Lunatic Edge into Harvest, or it's like using all 4 of your purple skills after that first rotation. You don't actually need to get every hit of Harvest to land to be able to get full meter. So let me talk about that a little bit more. Your other skills are going to be easier to land everything, right? Because they do have a paralysis immunity. Harvest is going to be the hardest one to land. So you just want to make sure that you're landing your other skills. Let's say you're doing, the Soul Drain into Lunatic Edge, right? Well, with Harvest, what you'll notice is you only really need to hit 3 of those hits to be able to get full meter. But the other thing to note is that for Harvest, you can actually spacebar out of the skill a little bit early. So if you look at this, we do 1, 2 spacebar. Now we didn't fill up the entire soul, all 3 soul stones, but that's where Rusted Nail comes in, right? Use that to finish it up. So if you see that a boss is about to attack you or knock you out of your Harvest, you can always use your spacebar, dodge out of it, and then finish it up with your Rusted Nail for your first rotation. But what about for the second rotation? The one where you're using Vestige, right? You are using all your purple skills, and you don't actually have Rusted Nail to help you finish off that last little piece of meter that you're missing if you do dodge in the middle of Harvest, right? Let's go 1, 2, dodge, you're missing a little. Well, 1, you can also auto attack and get it back, but that is a drop in DPS. So one little secret that I didn't mention earlier, and I could say I lied to you, is that Harvest doesn't actually need to hit all 3 of those hits to be able to get full meter. And what do I mean by that? Well, the Harvest hits aren't actually made equal in terms of meter gen. There's 4 hits, right? Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. Those hits are not made equal in terms of how much meter gen they actually give you. So instead of hitting the first 3 hits, you actually only need to hit the first 2 hits, or the last 2 hits, sorry, of Harvest for this second rotation. So I'll show you right here and demonstrate. We'll hit everything here. We still have some meter left, right? So we'll stand right here, and only the last 2 hits of our Harvest will hit, and it will give us full meter. There you go. So that is an area, again, you can optimize and greed for in damage. If a boss is doing, like, let's say Brel is doing its spinning attack, right? And you don't want to walk into that, well, you can kind of angle yourself and space yourself well enough to where you miss those 2 hits, but hit the last 2 so that it gives you that meter that you need. Again, Harvest is unfortunately one of our biggest meter gen skills because we use it in every single run of our rotations, but it is the only one without any sort of stagger immunity. So it is going to be the hardest to hit. So because of that, we need to be able to be flexible and optimize and think of creative ways to hit it so that we can still greed damage while the boss is doing attacks or things like that. So I just kind of showed you one way to do that, but I'm sure there are other ways that I haven't really thought about that you guys have seen already or have done already on your own gameplay. But that's about it for the advice today that I have for you. There's a lot of stuff still to be undiscovered for this class, in my opinion, that people probably in Korea are already doing, but maybe they haven't told us about it because nobody really mains Soul Eater, at least for a Western content creator, right, in Korea. So there's a lot of that's left for us to still discover. And when I do make those additional discoveries, I'll make another video right here. But for now, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. As always, remember to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know, is Night's Edge Soul Eater still a class that you're playing, or did you end up dropping it for one reason or another? I'm curious to know. And as always, remember, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the sub button, ring the bell for notifications, and additionally, I am doing a giveaway on Twitch this Friday during my stream. It'll be for 2 $100 Steam gift cards. So please come to my stream this Friday, January 5th, between 10 p.m. or I guess my stream starts at 10 p.m. PST and will probably end somewhere around like 2 a.m. PST. And while the giveaway is not going to be on YouTube, I will be streaming on YouTube as well, multi-stream, and I do that every night as well. So come join me on my Twitch, and if I don't see you there, hopefully I'll see you all on the next video. All right, guys, catch you later. Peace out.